Welcome back into the Blurred Wire. Today I'm going to go ahead and review The Electric State. I meant to do this last week, but it's been a little bit since it's been out, and I've been able to read a lot of reviews. A lot of people really don't like this movie at all. And in fact, apparently Kevin Feige is there's so much backlash on it, not backlash, but just so much, I guess, just dislike for this movie that Kevin Feige is even concerned about how are the Russo brothers going to do Infinity War and Endgame. And I'm not gonna lie, it seemed like the Russo brothers, I've loved them ever since Community because that's a show that I watched a lot. Like there's shows that you grow up on, and then there's shows that you kind of like adolescence on, I guess if that makes sense. So this is a weird way to put it. But Community was that for me. That was like my preteen, teenage years. That was the show that I watched a lot during that time. And so I always loved them from that, and my best friend loves Arrested Development, things that they come from. And to go from comedy to immediately go to a action-packed superhero spy thriller in The Winter Soldier was always kind of a jump because it's like, whoa, like that's a huge tonal shift. But they did a great job with it. I mean, Winter Soldier is still one of the most lauded MCU movies ever, and same thing for Civil War, still incredible. Um, and Infinity and then they kept it going because they did so well in those two. They did Infinity War, and then they ended up doing Endgame. So this is kind of going to be my review. And so since Endgame, the hottest directors out there were Anthony and Joe Russo because for the past 20 at the time Endgame had come out, they were the only directors to ever surpass James Cameron's movies in the past like 20 years. Because Titanic was number one at the box office until James Cameron surpassed it with Avatar. And so Joe and Anthony Russo, while Avatar is still number one again because Disney re-released it, Anthony and Joe Russo are still the only directors to ever at one point beat James Cameron in terms of box office revenue. Because at one point, Avengers Endgame was above Avatar. And I was really hoping it would maintain it, but it didn't. So they were the hottest names on the block, right? And so we're kind of getting towards some point here. So then we do a couple movies later. Now it's post Endgame, right? And everybody's trying to figure out what do we do post Endgame. And there's a lot of actors trying to find their way post Endgame. There's a lot, the MCU is trying to find its way post Endgame. And then you have the Russo brothers trying to find their way post Endgame. Because the logical theme that I kind of agreed with was like, okay, they left their mark. They're done. We're probably not going to use them again. Like to me, it wouldn't make sense to bring them back on anything because they did Endgame. Like that kind of ended it. And a lot of people say like, oh, the MCU should have ended after Endgame. I entirely disagree with that, and I hate that that's the narrative. But I would rather you give me like one good movie and one crappy movie as long as I keep getting movies, right? Like I don't agree with the idea that the MCU should have ended after Endgame because we've had a lot of great movies after Endgame. Now, if every single movie after Endgame was a flop, then maybe I'd say that because now you're like really ruining the legacy. But to me, it's been very hot and cold, is how I feel. Bad movie, good movie, bad movie, good movie, bad movie, good movie. Black Widow, bad. Shang-Chi, good. Eternals, bad. Spider-Man, No Way Home, good. And that's kind of how it's been. It's just like this constant flip-flop, and like we can't really decide like, are we going to do like projects with like good quality or not? And, we get clunkers like She-Hulk, but then we get awesome things like Loki, and they get a season two. So, anyway, back to the Russo brothers. So, they've directed a few movies outside of Endgame, and I've only seen a couple of them. So they did Cherry, which was on Apple TV, and I didn't end up seeing it. That one was on Tom Holland, and that was like a very different, like kind of grittier drama. And then they did The Gray Man, which starred Ryan Gosling, a whole bunch of big stars. Ryan Gosling was in it, Chris Evans was in it, and a couple other actors I can't think of right now. I know I said they were big stars, but Jessica Henwick from Iron Fist was in it. Renee Jean Paul, who's from Bridgerton, and another show that my wife and I watched. So they've been doing a lot of different things. Like they've continued acting, and The Electric Slate is kind of their latest one. And again, they're plucking another star from the MCU catalog, like Cherry plucked Tom Holland. Um, the Gray Man plucked Chris Evans, and for this one, they plucked Chris Pratt. Now, if I thought that they had directed Extraction a long time ago, but it turns out they didn't direct that one. They produced it, which is a shame because Extraction would have been by far the best movie out of all of these. Because The Gray Man wasn't bad, like we liked it well enough. It just kind of seemed like it relied on action and explosions rather than like a believable or followable narrative. Like at one point, you had Ryan Gosling chained to a bench and 30 trained killers around him, and he was not dead. Like that, like, like I said, it relied on a lot of action rather than like believability. And then Chris Evans, he just wanted to go and I think he just wants to show off his range because he can do a lot of different things. And he's like, I played the pretty boy Johnny Storm character all the way up until I got Captain America. Then I had to play the good boy, Captain America. And he's like, now I'm in my bad boy era. It's kind of what it felt like. Like that's how I would describe it. He went from pretty boy to good boy to bad boy. Um, but either way, so now we have the Electric State, and honestly, it wasn't terrible to me. I didn't think it was. I really didn't think it was that bad. I think like they had Millie Bobby Brown at the center, and I don't think that her acting necessarily. She didn't necessarily pull me into it. Like I kind of enjoyed her performance more in Enola Holmes because in Enola Holmes she was more kind of bubbly, kind of excited, and kind of she was having fun throughout it, and that was kind of infectious, and we like caught onto it, and that one was the first one was a lot more enjoyable. And this one, she's trying to play that jaded character, this kind of like mad at the world and everything, and like we can kind of connect with it, but just not on a great level. Like it doesn't really hit you as hard as not really even hit you as hard. You just don't really get a chance to connect with her character as much because she's working so hard to be closed off that it kind of ends up closing off the audience, honestly. And then I followed the storyline well enough, and I thought the action scenes at the end, and I thought the robots looked good. Um, I think they just, and I don't even think the movie first of all was incredibly expensive, which again, when you have Millie Bobby Brown in it, who just made $20 million for being in Damsel on Netflix, she's eating a chunk of your movie. You have Chris Pratt, who's been in $3 or $4 billion movies, right? At one point, his movies were the top five grossing of all time. So he's eating a chunk of your budget. Then you have Stanley Tucci in there, and then you have Giancarlo Esposito in there. And again, you want good performances, but you see how the budget is just ballooning up because you have all these big stars surrounding it, and so much of your budget has to go to the CGI, right? And I don't know if any of that affected the story because again, to me, all the robots look good. Um, and I followed the storyline well enough, and I thought it made sense what they were trying to do with it, and the way that everybody was, the way that they had the war between the humans and the robots, and then the humans were able to get the drones in order to defeat the robots, and the rise up, and the, kind of the back and forth, and the, like, if I think the only issue with it is that it felt really big, because that was like the storyline beforehand, and whenever you have to summarize something, it kind of takes away from the movie scope because you start off with this really big movie and then it kind of scoped all the way down into a smaller thing and then you kind of had a climactic battle. So I think just the scope and tone of the movie kind of fell off a little bit because again, all the other Russo brothers projects that have been successful, you start off smaller and then you get bigger, bigger, bigger. Like somehow Endgame managed to get bigger than Infinity War. Right? Now, like I like Infinity War better, but I can't deny the best final battle was definitely Endgame. Having the big three go against Thanos, and then having them all go against Thanos' army. That was the peak. That was the climax that continued building and felt kept the scope of the movie huge. And so we had this big scope of the movie when you're trying to tell us about what happened, and then it just kind of narrows down to these two people, right? And you realize that they're intrinsically involved, but you see how that can kind of like throw off the direction of what you're going in. And so I know my wife didn't really enjoy it that much. I didn't, like I said, I didn't think it was as terrible. I don't think it was as terrible as everybody's saying it is. If I had to rate it, I would give it a solid B minus, maybe a C plus. I didn't watch it and feel like revolted. And again, I haven't seen. I think the problem is like the Russo brothers set the bar really high. I think if a lot of other people had released Electric State, it would have done fine. Or if they had done it before, Infinity War or something like that. Same with Cherry, same with Rayman. And it's kind of what the MCU is facing right now. I think the Russo brothers have the same problem that the MCU is facing because Infinity War and Endgame set the bar so high for storytelling, cohesiveness, and scope. And now, if anything you do is not as good as that, it's going to look inferior. And it is inferior, right? Because it's not as good, but it looks so much more inferior because again, I think Winter Soldier was I mean Winter Soldier and Civil War like kind of tied for me, but like even if you think Winter Soldier is better than Civil War, Civil War doesn't seem worse because its scope is bigger. The storyline is opened up. And so, I mean, I don't think that's really fair to like have to judge the Russo brothers on that because they can do movies outside of the MCU too. Like they can't just like not work if they don't want. I mean, they could if they don't want to. But so now that they're, and I think that's, I don't know, it's not like part of the reason why they're going back to the MCU to do Secret Wars, but they're coming back to the MCU to do Secret Wars and Doomsday. And I would partially say that's probably because a lot of these movies that they've done haven't done as well. I think the Russo brothers need the MCU the way the MCU needs the Russo brothers, and I think they miss being able to work with like create a story that's based upon so many others, and again keep the scope getting big. I think I think like it was like, oh, the MCU is going back to the Russo brothers. But again, if you look at what the Russo brothers have done outside of the MCU, it's kind of like, well, the Russo brothers are kind of going back to the MCU. Like this is not like one person being like, I need to get back with my ex. These are two people that like broke up and are like, we kind of need each other. Let's go ahead and get back together. So I think that's the only thing that the Electric State has convinced me of. It's just very mediocre, I guess, to me. Um, Good move, easy movie to throw on at the background. But like I said, I did like the action sequences. I did think the fights look good at the end. If you're gonna give me a movie that's not like hitting as much with character development and stuff, at least make it look good. At least make it look like a real movie. So that's kind of my. I know I kind of reviewed like the Electric State and the Russo brothers and the Marvel of it all, but we can't really talk about the Russo brothers anymore without talking about Marvel. And so that would be my score for the Electric State. Solid B minus, probably C, maybe 70 is where I'm leaning right now. Let me know what you thought of it. Did you really think it was terrible? Did you actually really like it? Did you find it was cute and charming? I think my biggest issue with this movie was just, like you said, in trying to create a closed off character, jaded character, and Millie Bobby Brown. I think the audience felt closed off. And since we were on a journey with her the entire time, I think that kind of affected the tone. And then also the scope going from big to small, I think kind of ended up having a negative effect. So I still think the Russo brothers are the right choice for Secret Wars. But like I said, with this huge budget, that's what makes me worried about, bringing someone like Robert Downey Jr. back for Secret Wars makes me extremely nervous because, again, he's a $40 million actor. And that's going to eat up so much of your effects budget, of your, like, that's a team of like 10, not even 10 writers. That's a team of like over 400 writers or animators, right? That budget going to one single person. And I love Robert Downey Jr. He crushed it at Iron Man. He deserves it all, but we don't need him back, right? Like I'll go back to that over and over again, but I'm like Doctor Doom, like you could have got Killian Murphy, like that would have been fine, but also like there are plenty of actors out there who can act that don't come with multi-million-dollar price tags. And like, yeah, if an actor is good, he should get paid for his work. That's not what I'm saying at all. But when you have a movie whose budget is probably going to get out of control very quickly, let's not compromise the movie. Let's not compromise the production quality of the movie so we can bring in a big name. That's my thing. And I don't think the Electric State suffered from that. I don't think they compromised their budget from bringing in all these big names because to me, again, everything looked realistic and stuff. And they really wanted to do the retro 90s theme and things like that. Um, but I do think that doing all that, something got compromised in there, right? Like the acting performances were fine. They weren't incredible, but they also weren't lackluster to me. Except for, like I said, just the way that and I don't even think Millie Bobby Brown did a bad job. I think just the way they wrote her character. Um, so yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts on the Electric State and how I think it affects the Marvel of it all. Pretty soon they're going to start working on Doomsday, and pretty soon they're going to start working on Secret Wars. So yeah, we just heard news that Elizabeth Olsen will not be returning in Secret Wars, which I don't think was a big surprise. I think Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness kind of ended her story, um, like they wanted to, and I think that's kind of the like with the multiverse saga. What I would have been trying to do is, okay, we've got a lot of characters, how can we start ending some of these stories as we introduce new ones, right? And I think that's one thing that the MCU hasn't really been able to do. And so we'll see if the Russo brothers are able to do it better. But let me know your thoughts on the Electric State. I know this kind of ended up being a multiverse review, multiverse saga review instead of an Electric State review. But let me know your thoughts on the Electric State. Do you think it's going to do well? Do you think it's, I mean, do you think it was a good movie? Do you think it was poorly made? And what would you like to see from the Russo brothers in the future? And we will catch you guys next time.